Welcome to Rogue Bows. This is episode 7. Holy shit, bro. We are 7 in. We're still here.
Shit. How about that? 7 fucking episodes, man.
Yeah, who would have thought?
7 episodes.
I thought there'd be billboards and protests by now, but we're doing something right. Our following and our subscribers and our listens continue to slowly surge up week to week, which is a good sign. Considering this is a weekly podcast right now, you know, it's obviously hard to have people tune in for the first episode when they can just get the latest one, but there's gold all throughout them. So I recommend you know, if you've just caught onto the podcast, to get listening to from episode 1 essentially. But how's things going down there?
Not bad. I'm actually, believe it or not, drinking a green smoothie right now. That 2% body fat, chiseled out of granite prick Kyle Collinsworth guilted me into it, and I'm actually drinking one for once. So you win, God. You win.
Was that after a few cheeseburgers or before?
Oh, yeah. It's just, you know, it makes me feel good. It's actually, you know how like those real fancy dinners, you have that like little break in between before the real meal comes. So this is like my little break before the real meal comes.
This is your cheat day. So your cheat day is the green smoothie. Most athletes' cheat days are the burger.
Yeah, my cheat day is any day that ends in Y, brother.
Let's get rolling. We're almost a third through the NBA season. It's been pretty interesting. You know, COVID's throws some curveballs. There's, you know, trades. There's teams that are doing better than I thought and worse than I thought. So I guess we'll just get into the standings. It's pretty interesting. Philly, who I thought would have a pretty good year, are number 1 at the moment. They have had a bit of a cupcake schedule to now because they've played some pretty easy beat teams, especially over the last month or two. They did beat the Lakers recently, but I'm still not completely sold, but I thought they'd be up there somewhere with a new coach. Everything else in the East is at least in the top 5 is where it should be. Atlanta's surprising. I didn't think they'd be that high. Cleveland, New York. I mean, basically after Atlanta, it's kind of a free-for-all for anybody's game. And I mean, how do you see the East?
Yeah, it's a little bit unstable now. Like the top 5, like you said, was sort of what we thought about. You know, it might be 1 or 2 teams out of order, but with Toronto and Miami, I didn't expect to be, you know, bottom of the East right now. Obviously, Miami getting affected by COVID and some injury stuff. You know, I think some of this will play itself out. I think some of the teams that are playing well, like, you know, maybe like a Cleveland or an Atlanta or even New York, they might fall. But let's not forget, folks, they got top 10 make it. They have that play-in. So, you know, it'll be interesting that who gets the 10 spots. But I think Miami and Toronto, I mean, they're still only about a game and a half out of the playoff right now. I mean, just the top 8. So I think if, you know, those 2 teams might move, but yeah, it's sort of what we expect up top.
Yeah, I mean, one I got completely wrong was the Washington Wizards. You know, they I thought they'd be better than they were just because of kind of a Russell Westbrook with a chip on his shoulder and Beal coming into his own and healthy. I thought they'd at least be 500, but I mean, if I'm going to put a line through a few teams in the East that I can guarantee you won't make it, I mean, the only 2 I can say are Detroit and Washington at this point. I don't think they have any chance of making that playoff run, but the Washington Wizards are definitely a bit of a letdown, in my opinion.
Yeah, they definitely are. I mean, I think everybody wanted to see that Wall trade, and I thought everyone thought it was be an upgrade with Westbrook, and I think they tried their best. I mean, he got hurt a little bit. They got hit with COVID. It's just not really working out. Bradley Beal's having a Hall of Fame season. They're still at the bottom of the barrels, you know, as far as the Eastern teams. So it'll be interesting what they do going forward. But yeah, it's that definitely took us for a curveball, I would say.
Yeah, I had him in the playoffs just as my dark horse from last season. If it was the one team I'd pick that didn't make it, that would make it, but that looks like it might be the Knicks. I mean, the Knicks are right in the mix, but it is kind of all over the place. Charlotte's up and down. Chicago's playing well of late. Orlando's a bit further down than we thought. I mean, but it is early. We are a third in, so no reason to get too excited or down on your picks. But yeah, I think Detroit and Washington for me, I'll scratch. My guarantees right now that will 100% make the playoffs from the East: Philly, Brooklyn, Milwaukee, Boston, Indiana. And beyond that, it's a coin flip, I think, from 6, which is Atlanta, all the way down to Miami in 13. I think realistically any of those teams could scrape in.
Yeah, Indiana will be interesting what happens now with Karis LeVert as far as when he's going to come back, because they did trade Oladipo away, and you know, right now he had the kidney surgery, and I haven't read, maybe you did, about how long it's going to take for his recovery. But, you know, if he misses an extended period of time, that's a lot of offense to miss out of their lineup. But besides that, I mean, they're a fighting, scrapping group. Nate Bjorken's doing a great job, in his first season. That's the only team I could see sort of slipping out of that top 5. But yeah,
they slip out of the playoffs though. I don't think they do. I mean, I think they
no, they won't slip out of the playoffs. No, they won't. They're a solid 5 right now, and they would probably stay in at 4, 5, 6 all season. But now I'm just interested to see what that LeVert, depending on how long it takes him to come back and how that's going to affect their win total.
Solid 5. I met a few of those back in the day when I was going to the bars. Good to hear.
Yeah, shit.
Go to the West. Much of a muchness. I definitely didn't have Utah playing this well this early. They're a team that usually have good regular seasons, but they falter in the playoffs. But they're balling right now. Clippers, Lakers, as expected. San Antonio, I mean, at 4 right now, they've overachieved for sure with that roster. It's a young roster, but they're playing well. The Australian Patty Mills off the bench is filling up buckets for them and just jacking off that bench and giving them a really good punch. Denver's kind of been up and down, but have gone a little run as of late. Memphis, I didn't think would be there. I didn't think they'd be this good, even though what have they played? 13 games. Everyone else is around 20, so they've got some catching up to do with the COVID stuff. Portland's in the mix. Golden State, I had that in my 8, and then Houston, and then I think basically everyone in that bottom half was expected besides Dallas. I mean, Dallas is the one. I mean, I know they've had issues with COVID and injuries, but I think every team pretty much has dealt with something along those lines, and they've been pretty disappointing, 1/3 into the season.
Yeah, they have. I mean, obviously COVID's top of the list of their problem. And then the second, it was Porzingis, starting the season late because of the coming back from knee surgery. And then just the lack of effort defensively, consistent effort defensively from them. I think they're going to level off and do a lot better, if Porzingis could stay healthy, and they could also, obviously stay out of that COVID bug. But I think that, they've been disappointing, up to date. Like last night, you watched that game against Utah?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Ugly.
Yeah. I mean, they just didn't give much effort at all. I don't want to say they quit or anything, but their effort level was low, especially defensively, shot selection, just jacking up shots. I mean, I think someone said on the telecast that they're one of the worst teams in the league shooting the 3. So they're struggling right now. I expect them to battle up. I think they'll make the playoffs and probably in the top 5, the lower end of that, of course. But I think that they'll make a comeback in the last 3 quarters of the season.
I think that's a prime example of a role player. I think Maxi Kleber is a huge, very important role player for them. And it just seems like without him, the balance of their kind of rosters kind of being thrown out of whack. And he's an underrated defender, in my opinion. He's a very, very good defender. He can switch, 1 through 5 when they go small ball. I think they miss a guy like that. He's not a huge stats guy. He's not a huge imposing figure that you think, they can win games without him. But I think he's been heavily missed, mainly at the defensive end. Even though he shoots the ball well, I think he's just a solid intangibles guy you need. No,
without question. And look, they're top 3 with Luka, Porzingis, and Hardaway. Those guys are wired for offense. I wouldn't say either, any of those 3 are wired for defense. So you need guys like Richardson, like Dorian Finney-Smith, like Maxi Kleber, like Dwight Powell, guys like that, even Will Cauley-Stein, which is weird because when they were going through like they had a run where they were pretty good defensively, and he played some major minutes. And I know Porzingis was out, but he's sort of been in the bottom of the barrel as far as their rotation in the last 5 or 6 games. So, but I agree with you. I think they really miss Maxi. I think they missed Dorian Finney-Smith, and those guys now coming back from COVID, they got to get back into shape and get back into rhythm. I think they'll be good, down the line, but it's going to take some time, and they're really struggling. And now they got to play Phoenix in a back-to-back tonight in Dallas, and Porzingis isn't going to play, so that'll be interesting how that game's going to unfold. And they lost 5 straight.
And a few others. I think they've got Golden State coming up as well. They've got a few tough teams coming into town that can easily beat them. But who you putting a line through in the West right now? Who can we just throw away for this season?
I think you could throw away Minnesota. I think Minnesota's like the only team you could really throw away in the West because New Orleans is up and down. I think if they acquire some shooting, I think they could still make a run for the playoffs. I think OKC will probably fall down on earth a little bit. They've been probably better than expected, but I would probably just say Minnesota for now. What do you think, Bogues?
Minnesota 100%. They're 4-14 as we speak. I think New Orleans, which we'll touch on a bit more in depth later, I think I'll put a line through them. From what I'm hearing from my people over there, it's not a pretty situation. We'll get to that a little bit later. Sacramento is an intriguing one, like Luke Walton, Harrison Barnes, former teammates of mine and former coaches, and they have a pretty talented roster. They just can't seem to make a run. Like they're kind of like when I was in Milwaukee. You win 2 straight and then you lose 1, and then you win 3 straight and you lose 3 straight. It's just the whole season goes along like that. They can just never really find any rhythm. I think they've won 3 straight right now, but yeah, it just seems like they just can't get any consistency of how to win games.
Yeah, they really can't. I mean, they have a young team, but they lost Bogdanovich. They have Harrison Barnes. They've got some vets that are decent. Buddy Hield's getting a little older. But like Fox is trying to take that next step in his game. They've got Bagley's been up and down, but they still got a ways to go to how to be consistent. And as you know, I think consistency is the first step into trying to be a winning team. And they really haven't had a winning history there in the last decade or so. So I think they're trying to sort of piece it together. But that'll be an interesting team. I didn't think they were going to do all that well, and they're only 6.5 out of the playoffs. They're only about a half game out of that top 10 spot, and only a game and a half out of 8. So they're interesting right now. And Houston and Golden State were shockers for me. I thought those two were going to fall off, and they're sort of right around the 8 spot too. So there's like a 1, 2, 3. There's like a 4-way tie. 6, 7, 8, 9 with 5 out of the playoffs, and then you got Houston and OKC and Sac, and as you go down the line.
Yeah, I only got the balls to put 3 as will make it, and that's Utah, both LAs, the Clippers and the Lakers. Other than that, it's open for business. It can go either way, and the curveball with this season, not only is injury but COVID. Does the Spurs lose DeMar DeRozan for 10, 15 days in a crucial part of the season, then do they slip out of the 8 or the 10? I mean, you just don't know what's going to happen, and I guess that's what's been pretty intriguing about watching it, of how well prepared the coaches of the good teams have their guys to say, hey, it's the next man up mentality, and really emphasizing that. Those teams have generally not missed a beat, but I'm just interested to see how that all plays out. Yeah,
I think it's like, with this season, up is down, right is left. You just don't know. It's like Bizarro world, right? I mean, with the COVID and how the season started and all that, you just don't know. And like you said, it's a next man up mentality. You got to be prepared. I think the organizations that are strong from top to bottom, that sort of have control over things, have players that are bought into like not going out as much, not being exposed as much, trying to keep out of COVID's way, out of harm's way that way. I mean, it's really hard because you got to depend on the whole organization from top to bottom to sort of, we talked about COVID all the time in the NBA in the last few shows, and you got to really be diligent about this. And, some organizations can do it, some can't. And, it's like you said, you can only put a few teams in, almost a guaranteed playoff, and everything else is going to be depending on COVID and injury.
Yeah. And explain to everyone listening, how is this, playing game working? So it's top 10 goes through, and how does that work?
So how I read it tonight, it's a strange deal. So top 6 make it, they're in.
Okay.
And then 7 plays 8, and then 9 plays 10. 7 and 8 play 1 game, 9 and 10 play 1 game, and then the winner of 9-10 plays 8.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Well, they play 8. They play the loser of 7-8.
Yep.
And then I don't really exactly know how it goes from there, but I know 7-8 plays 1 game, 9-10 plays 1 game, and then the winner plays the loser from each of those games. And then from there, I think the higher seeds got to win 1 game to get in, and then the lower seeds, they got to win 2 games to get in. So they become 7 and 8. So out of those, 2 teams are going to get eliminated to become 7 and 8. So I was trying to read up on it. I sort of know how it goes, but not exactly. But it's a sort of a weird deal as far as how they're doing it this year. Obviously, they're changing up the playoff format.
Yeah, it's interesting why they would do that. I guess COVID is the excuse to try new shit. But the NBL is doing something similar with a mid-season hub type tournament, which has, it counts towards a regular season, but also counts as its own individual cup with prize money. So I guess this is a a good time to try new stuff if you're going to try it because you've got an excuse to do it.
Absolutely. And that's the NBA's MO the last few years. They're trying to do more things, especially since Silver took over. That they've been trying a lot of new things, since he's taken over the last few years, and this is unlike any other year as well. Just trying to try new stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's get on to the Utah Jazz. They're balling. Good friend and teammate of mine, former teammate Joe Ingles. Congratulations. He passed John Stockton for, I believe, all-time three-point makes in franchise history, which is pretty impressive considering he's only been in the league since 2014, I believe, and playing vital minutes since then. But I guess they're the anti-small ball as much as you can get these days. They still go small at times, but they generally have a traditional center out there at all times. Rudy obviously is not going to shoot a shot outside of 3 feet, and they're 15 and 4 right now. So, I mean, how have you seen their season? Can they go deeper than, the second round?
Well, they're fun. I mean, they're a fun team to watch. They have a real traditional center. Even though they do have a traditional center and they don't play small ball a lot, they top 3 in the league in 3-point attempts, and they're bottom 3 in the league in 2-point attempts. So they're still jacking up threes, but they play with the center. He protects the rim, he runs, he rebounds. They move the ball. It's sort of like watching a high-level EuroLeague team. I don't mean that by any disrespect. It's just a fun team to watch because they move the ball. They got guys like Bogdanovich and Ingles that, they're not the most athletic players in the world, but they play slow, but they play really smart. And they move the ball. They got Donovan Mitchell, who's their one superstar. They don't really have a superstar after that. They remind me of that, sort of like that Dallas Maverick team in 2011, that Detroit Piston team that won it, like 20 years ago when they had like Chauncey Billups and those guys. One superstar, a bunch of really hard-nosed players after that. The only thing, Bogues, to me in the playoffs, and it's going to be a problem, I think, for them, I think they can win a round or two, no problem. But when you start getting to conference final and final, I think you need multiple superstars and guys that could really carry the mail. And that's going to put a lot of weight on Jordan Clarkson's shoulders to come off the bench. He's averaging about 18 a game right now, and he's killing it. But in the playoffs, how we talked about last week, how playoff teams are going to, like, game to game, make those changes and try to take Donovan Mitchell out of it. You're going to rely a lot on the three, and you're going to rely a lot on Jordan Clarkson. The only problem that I see with them after about 8 guys, they really fall off as far as star power, as far as firepower. Once you get past like Clarkson and those guys, like then you get players like Derek Favors, Georges Niang. They don't really have, a lot of firepower after that. Not that many teams do, but like I saw this like with the Tibbs when he coached Chicago, when he had Derrick Rose before he got hurt, when they played in the Eastern Conference Finals against Miami. When they had LeBron and those guys, and they punched Miami in the mouth with Derrick Rose early in the playoffs. And then they just swallowed up Derrick Rose, and Chicago really didn't have, they had like Rip Hamilton and Boozer and, Joakim Noah. They didn't really have another guy to really carry the mail. I just worry about that deep in the playoffs, having that firepower to really, consistently win in the playoffs with that. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think they can get close. I think, like you said, their ball movement is beautiful to watch. The ball doesn't stick, and you can see it goes to Ingles. Do I have an open shot? No. Swing it straight away. It's that quick decision. It's not, you see a lot of teams these days, someone will create a double team and kick it out to a guy, and then if he hesitates for that 1 second about, do I swing it? Do I put it on the floor? Or do I shoot it? It's over. That advantage you have for a split second is over, where the Jazz, it's quick, simple decision. Wide open, nope. Someone's closing me out. Swing, wide open shot. But you're right. I mean, in the playoffs, the deeper you get, as we spoke about last week, it becomes a grind out half court game at times, especially through different periods of different quarters, mainly late, and especially in the fourth quarter. Like it's very hard to run and move the ball that efficiently because everything's a grind out possession. So I think you're right to an extent. Donovan's going to have a lot of it on his shoulders, Clarkson as well, but it's going to have to be Ingles or Bogdanovich. It's going to have to be one of those guys.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, they play great. They play tough. I really like Royce O'Neal. He's really developed into a very good starting player in the league. He's improved his shooting. They've got Mike Conley's a warrior. They got a great just team chemistry. And look, Donovan Mitchell, is out for both games against Dallas, and they kill him both games. They destroyed him. So it is a next man up mentality. Quinn Snyder's a really good coach. I mean, they look like they play together. It's just in the playoffs when you got to play like the Lakers and you got LeBron and Anthony Davis, and then they got a slew of other guys. Can they really do it against a team like that? I think they can win definitely a round. They could definitely win 2. But once they get to the Western Conference Finals, and if they get to the finals, I think it's going to be really hard. Like I think Miami found that out against LA in the finals last year, where like they zipped through the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, but then they didn't have enough star power, enough firepower. Shot making is great, but unless you have elite shot making like Golden State with you guys did a few years back, it's really hard to be consistent shot makers throughout the whole playoffs.
And the other thing with Utah being number 1, their home court really doesn't come into play. So, I mean, there is a bit of an altitude there, which can be, I think, more in a regular season when you're not acclimatized with being there for a couple of days, it can get you. But in a playoff series, you come in 2 or 3 days before and it doesn't really get you as much. But also that those fans in Utah are fantastic fans that create a really hostile environment. So even if they finish first, they'll probably lose a little bit because of the COVID thing. They'll only be allowed to probably have 25, 30% capacity. So that'll be one to watch. We'll keep an eye on that. Bradley Beal situation. What have you got for me for the trade rumors around that, where we know in the NBA, once stuff starts going to the media, where there's smoke, there's fire. What do you have?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's been pretty good. He reminds me of Paul Pierce right before Boston made the trade in 2008. The team was just teams, a very bad team. They don't really have a lot going on in their roster, and now you've got a situation where it's hitting the media, free Bradley Beal and all this. And I think Washington's tried. I mean, look, they got off of Wall's money, and, they brought in Westbrook, and it just doesn't really work so far. And when you're trying to put these trades together, because you've seen 1,000 of them. I researched like 3 or 4 for the last 3 or 4 days about all these trades that people are thinking that they're going to do for Bradley Beal. Well, first of all, you got to understand this. Just because you go to ESPN Trade Machine and the trade works doesn't mean it's a trade that could actually happen. So when you're trying to figure these trades out, you got to figure out, A, does it work for both teams? B, what types of trades have been made for players like Bradley Beal in the last couple of years? So you got to go back to the Harden trade. You got to go back to, Chris Paul originally getting traded a couple of years ago. You got to go to trades like that, Westbrook getting traded, the Paul George trade. What's the common theme? Because you know how NBA teams, they just follow what's going on. So what the teams have been getting back in these mega deals are, you could go 3 ways of the trade. You can go player for player. Like a lot of people are saying, well, they'll make a trade for a major player like Ben Simmons. Well, right now, Bradley Beal, in my opinion, is like the 15th best player in the league. You get the 15th best player in the league, and he's averaging 34 points a game, and you're the worst team in the East, one of the worst teams in the league. So by getting another player, they're spending over $100 million in salary this year and next year. They can't really make a move. So if you go player for player, that's not really helping you. You're not going anywhere. So I think the deal has to be for a boatload of picks and pick swaps, and either a young player or just get your picks. So in my opinion, I think he's going to be dealt. I think these things never go well. He hasn't said anything. He hasn't motioned towards it, but you know how this is going to go. Once that little boulder goes over the cliff, it starts turning into an avalanche real quick.
How many years
does
he have
left
on his contract?
He's got 2 years left. So he's got this year, and then he's got a player option for next year. Well, he's got 2 additional after this one. So he's at 28.8 this year. He's got 34.5 in 2021-22, and then he's got a player option for 37.3. So the number's actually pretty good to trade. It's 28.8. You don't have to come up with a lot of capital to get the trade done. Right now they got $132 million to spend in salary. Next year is about $119 million. So they can't really make a move. So I think he's going to get traded. I think I thought up of 3 trades that I think that's pretty efficient for them, what they're trying to do. I think the first trade I would look for the New Orleans. New Orleans made that trade with LA. They've got, they got a bunch of draft picks in the Anthony Davis trade with LA, and they got their own picks. They need shooting desperately. They actually put together a pretty good team in the last couple of years with Ingram and Adams and Zion, but they need shooting, and they need another superstar to go with Ingram and Zion to try to do something. They're a little bit desperate, in my opinion, to try to make that work. Their season's sort of teetering a little bit. So I think that you need salary to make the deal work. So you probably have to throw in JJ Redick. You got to do Lonzo Ball, and probably 6 picks between draft picks and pick swaps, where you can get about 3 draft picks and 3 pick swaps. So you could have action in the next 6 years of drafts, where every other year you get their pick, and then you could pick swap every other year if their pick's better than yours. So I think their asking price has to be at least 6 or like 3 or 4 first rounders, or 3 or 4 pick swaps to go around with it. So I'm thinking either JJ and Ball. With Ball, you get a starter, a solid starter. He hasn't really, he really hasn't lived up to his hype in the draft, but he is a solid starter. He's just not someone you can really depend on to really do a lot for you, but he can play for you. JJ's, he's probably having the worst year of his career this year, but his $13 million will make the deal, help make the deal work. And then Ball, you could probably re-sign. It's his last year of his deal, so you could probably do a cap-friendly extension, and then you have your picks. And then you could probably even throw in another young player like a Jackson Hayes or that kid Alexander, who are pretty good young players. And I think for New Orleans, they got to do something to acquire a really good player. And I think they're going to open up about $20 million in cap room next year, but you're not going to get anything for $20 million. You're going to get a vigilante. You're going to get a guy you have to overpay. And I think that getting a chance to acquire Ball for a bunch of draft picks, Beal for a bunch of draft picks, and a couple of players that you really aren't using, that's not really helping you all that much. I think that's sort of a trade you might want to look at.
Yeah, I agree.
The second deal,
I think Washington.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I think Washington I would agree. I think they should just blow it up. Essentially, there's no point trying to get back players that you think are going to help you win now. I think get a young Ball for Beal and a bunch of picks. I think is your best case scenario. I just don't see them getting, wanting to get a superstar back. It's going to be a straight rebuild for Washington. Who else you got?
Yeah, the one other one I have that's interesting, it was my third trade, but it's most interesting, to Golden State. Now, Golden State has Minnesota's pick next year in this year's draft.
Just protected, right?
It's protected, top 3 protected, so they'll get it if it's 4-30, and then if it doesn't go and it's protected, they get it. I think the protection is a little levied off next year, but they get a top pick. Golden State's going to have a decent pick, probably somewhere in the teens, and I would ask them for Wiseman. So you would do Oubre to make the money work. That's $14 million. Then you get, Wiseman, and then you get Golden State's pick, and then that Minnesota pick. Now, Golden State would pay probably more luxury tax than anyone else in the history of the game, but they'll have now another superstar to go with Curry, Thompson, Green, and Draymond. They have the firepower. People are going to want to see that in action. Wiseman's a really good player, but you're getting Bradley Beal, who will probably be a high-level player for the next 5 years. I think for Golden State, it sort of re-energizes them, and then they'll have to give up Wiseman and a pick. I don't see that pick really helping Golden State in the next couple of years. It's going to be a developmental project. So, in my opinion, that wouldn't be a bad one.
It's a hard one for Golden State because they're in a position where they're not in a rebuild yet, but they're getting close. Those guys, Steph, Clay, even Draymond, all early 30s, getting up there in age. So you'd argue that Steph and Clay, especially Clay coming off an injury, but Steph especially, probably 2 or 3 more years at a high level, playing high 30s. With the amount of usage that he has, still will be very efficient in his mid to late 30s because of the way he shoots the ball. So, but they're in that period where they're stuck in the middle of do we make that deal for Beal and kind of give up on Wiseman and the younger part of the roster, or do we stand pat and develop Wiseman and try to keep building towards getting back to the top with a young group? So they're in a tough position, in my opinion, because I think you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you're in their situation, I don't think there's a right decision for them going down the track. But that'd be an interesting one. It would definitely re-energize things in the Bay Area for sure. But I'm just not sure if they, do they get off Wiseman that quickly? I mean, it's he's developed pretty well so far, but I just know fans out there can be somewhat impatient considering the success they've had. And I think Wiseman on a bad team right now would probably look much better statistically on a team that didn't have, Steph and Draymond and that wasn't so three-point orientated. If you put Wiseman, with Washington right now, essentially, I think his numbers would be much, much better because everything would be going through him.
Yeah, and it reminds me of Minnesota and Cleveland. When Cleveland were going to get, Cleveland got the first pick, they drafted Wiggins, and then they got LeBron. And then they traded Wiggins to get Love just to sort of give them more firepower. I sort of see it like that. Like, look, they have plenty of time. They have plenty of time to rebuild this thing. And those rebuilds sometimes take a long time to do. I mean, look at every team besides like San Antonio when you're talking about rebuilding. The Mavericks won it in 2011. They still haven't won a playoff series since. LA took a big dive after probably their last time. They won the title in 2010. They had a decent team in 11, and then they just sort of dismantled it in like 12, 13. And it takes a while for them to get back. It took them like 7 years of, 6, 7 years of being very mediocre. So I think that you go for it. Bradley Beal's 27. You're giving up Wiseman, yes, but Bradley Beal could take you past when you move off of things that they're going to try to move off of. I mean, you still get 5 to 6 good years of Bradley Beal. So, I think that's acquiring a player in the top 20, you don't have the chance to do that. And I think by giving up some things, I think it'd be very beneficial. And the only other team I could see them really making a deal with, and I'm sure that there are a million pinball wizards that could come up with 3-team, 4-team trades. I'm not going to do that. But the New York Knicks. The New York Knicks are one of the only teams that actually have cap room. So you don't have to take back a lot of salary with them. I would probably ask them now they got some picks from Dallas in the Porzingis trade. They've got their own picks. So, I mean, I would probably ask them for Mitchell Robinson, who's still in his rookie deal, Knox, who's still in his rookie deal, and like just to throw in like a Dennis Smith with this $5 million to make the deal work. Plus, again, another 3 first-round picks, another 4 first-round picks with pick swaps as well. And I think for New York, they need a superstar. They need somebody, who could sort of carry the mail. I know they're doing really well. They could put Beal with Randall and the rest of some of the other guys they have going. And, and I think they could sort of get something going there. New York will probably want to do the deal. And they got a bunch of draft picks. And the draft picks won't be great. But again, there'll be picks. You got a starting center in Robinson. You got a good rotation player in Knox, who sort of have had a probably pretty rough year and a half in his career, but has some potential out of the draft a couple years back. And you just get those picks. I think for Washington, picks and young players is the way to go if you're going to make this deal. And that's my opinion, Bogues. How do you see it on a player's perspective?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's a hard one. I think the Knicks thing, Mitch Robinson will get his chance to show us that he'll be allowed to show what he can do. What was the tweet? He tweeted, can't wait to get the chance to show what I can do or give him the opportunity or something like that. Was along those lines?
Yeah, he wants more opportunity like every other NBA player, but he's limited, but he blocks shots, he rim runs, and he rebounds. And in this world of 3-pointers and layups, like he plays a traditional center. He doesn't space because he's like Zion. He doesn't, like the charge circle's his 3-point line because he can't shoot past 3 feet. And he's not really all that skilled offensively, but he runs, he offensive rebounds, he rolls to the rim, he's a lob threat, and he's got decent size, and he's still under a rookie deal. And that's the biggest thing for Washington. You're trying to shed salary, you're trying to get picks, you're trying to develop your picks. Because right now, for Washington, besides the 2 guys that got up top with Beal, with Beal and Westbrook, you're only really looking at Hachimura, the kid from Gonzaga, the Japanese kid.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good starter. He's like 13-5. And then the kid they drafted, Denny Avdija. Yeah. He's like 7-4. He's not bad. He's a decent starter. And I really like Bertans, but besides that, you really don't have anything.
Yeah, I mean Thomas Bryant.
Yeah, and
He's okay.
He tore his knee up too. He's out for the year. So
yeah, I think second time. I think he tore it in college too, actually. So one other one for the Wizards situation. Is there any chance they just throw all the toys out of the cot and move Beal and try to move Westbrook? I don't see anyone taking Westbrook with that contract, but is there any chance they just say, screw it, let's just blow this thing up completely? We're not getting fans to games anyway, so no one's going to be too angry.
Yeah, so for the Westbrook deal, and if you looked at it, like when Oklahoma City wanted to get off Chris Paul because they want to shed salary and just go younger. And then when you're trying to shed a player like that with a really big contract, same thing with other players that are just like Westbrook's a good player, but he's an aging superstar, I guess you call him. And he doesn't have many great years left. He's got a lot of mileage on him. You're going to have to give up at least a pick, if not two, probably 2 picks to get off his salary. He's got a couple of years left after this one as well with a player option. So you're probably going to have to deal a couple of picks. You're not really going to get anything back except expiring contract for him, or just like that Wall Westbrook trade where you're just getting one guy for another. So I would probably try to do that, but it's going to cost you. So that's why getting a boatload of picks in the Bradley Beal trade, you could probably turn a couple of picks into this Westbrook trade if you're going to deal Westbrook and say, yeah, let's get off of it. I would get off both of them. Get your picks, get off Westbrook, because I don't think Westbrook wants to go through a rebuild. Let him go to another team that has a chance to sort of do something, and just give that team a couple of picks and bring back their unwanted contracts or their expiring deals, and then just sort of make it work that way. Maybe take on a guy and just cut him and stretch out his contract, and then just go with these picks and go with your young guys right now and try to do something.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch. Hopefully he ends up on a team that's going to the playoffs. It'd be nice to see him get to the playoffs. That's Beal I'm talking about, and see how that goes. But moving on to the Pelicans, I mean, they're in a tough spot. They're kind of in no man's land. They're half young, few veterans, as we've discussed with the potential trade that you put forward. I mean, they're kind of all over the place. I've got some pretty good intel. Van Gundy's going nuts. Shocker. 3-hour practices, 2-hour shoot-arounds. Now, for people out there, shoot-arounds generally go for 50 minutes max. That's a game day morning session for a night game. Practices in season, you're probably on the court for an hour and a half, maybe an hour of a team session, and then 30, 40 minutes of your own shooting, and then you're out of there. So he's got guys on their legs. He's frustrated. They are one of the few teams defensively that seems to pack the paint at all costs and give up threes, late contest threes, where the game's moved kind of away from that. It seems like Stan's kind of stuck in the early 2000s mentality of coaching, and I'm waiting for something to implode there, and that could be that trade.
Yeah, I mean, they've got an interesting team. They've got so much into Zion. They just extended Ingram. They extended Adams. But like with Van Gundy, right? Like, you knew what you were getting. That's the thing. Like, when you're hiring a coach, you hired the coach, you knew what you were getting. You're getting an old school guy that, is a little moody, and he's going to go hard. He's going to, you're going to practice a lot. It's sort of like getting Tibbs. Like, those guys don't change. So you knew what you were getting. Now, on the other end, he gets you organized. He gets your guys playing hard. He's a really good teacher. But that team, we talked about it countless times here, they just don't have enough spacing. If JJ Redick's not making shots right now, and Ingram and Ball had a huge night the other night. I don't think he had the other night he had like 35 or something. I don't think he had 35 since high school. I just don't, he's not going to do that for you every night. He's just not built like that. So you need something. And I think trying to get Bradley Beal, and whatever it's going to take to get Bradley Beal, because like I said, they did a pretty good job restructuring deals, and they're going to get off some money this year to get about $20 million or so in cap room. That's before the Lonzo Ball extension that they haven't extended him yet. So for me, I'll throw any amount of picks to get Bradley Beal right now, because you're not going to acquire an all-star there. It's just not going to happen. Zion doesn't shoot the ball. He can't shoot the ball from three, and you just don't have enough consistency to spread that court out. Steven Adams gives you a huge rebounding advantage. He gives you an advantage on the floor, but sort of disadvantage with your spacing, having Zion and Adams on the floor at the same time. Ingram's a really good player. They got a couple of decent young players, nothing great with Nickel Alexander, and then, the kid Jackson Hayes is decent, but just not enough. I think acquiring Beal is something that I would really try to do, because I'm sure Dallas is going to try to acquire Beal at some point. I just don't think Dallas has enough assets to give up to make that trade happen, to put Luka and Porzingis. They're going to need to make a deal, I think, to sort of get this thing going right, because you know how it's going to go. Van Gundy's going to start getting pissed. Players will start getting a little frustrated, tuning him out if they start losing. But they had a really good win the other night. Who they beat? Milwaukee last night?
Yeah, and I'm looking at the stats. I mean, Ball had 27, not 35, but he was 7 for 13 from 3. They shot 48 threes they shot that game, which is amazing for them.
Jeez.
They were 21 for 48 and shot 43% from 3. And there was a critique from Ingram about a week ago that I read that he basically came out and said, we don't shoot enough threes. Like we're losing games because we don't get enough threes up compared to the rest of the teams we're playing against. And that's the curveball with them, is if they shoot the ball like that, even 1 out of 5, they're gonna win that game guaranteed, because you got some animals down there in Steven Adams and Zion just putting heat on the rim and physicality, that if you can just kind of relax that defense a little bit with some 3-point shooting, you end up being one of the best teams in the league. So I agree with you there. I mean, they just got to figure it out. And the Van Gundy thing, I just know, being a former player, those 3-hour practices and it's going to take legs from guys, and they're going to splutter at the end of the season if that's what's going on there from a pretty good source. It's hard to do that in this day and age with kind of all the travel and everything going on. And I mean, I had a coach like that in Milwaukee, Scott Skiles. We had, if we had bad losses, we'd practice for hours on end, and a lot of times you'd have guys kind of more banged up from practice than from games.
Yeah, I agree, and I think you have to you sort of have to read your team. This is a you got a lot of sensitive guys in that roster. You got a lot of guys that sort of probably ain't dancing that type of music. So those 3-hour practice things, and I think you only have a certain amount of bullets in your gun to really pull things like that throughout the season. And I don't think that they're going to really deal with it. Like, I know Zion, from my information, shut off the last staff, when things started, you don't want that to happen again here with him and some of those other guys. Ingram's got his money now, so he might be having a little bit of a different sort of outtake on things, once those guys get extensions. So they got to make a move. I definitely expect them to be pretty aggressive at trade deadline and see what happens.
Yep. Moving on to a new segment, we've got Fact or Fake News. So we're just going to do a couple of quick hitters. We're going to try to take 30 seconds each, Pro. I know it's going to be hard for you, but we're going to try. The first one, Lakers will go back-to-back. Go.
Lakers going back-to-back. I see them having a chance to go back-to-back just because the upgrades they made in the offseason. Those guys, they're sort of messing with the game sometimes. They're just not all that motivated in some games. I get it. But I just think in the end, they have the star power. The one thing that's holding them back last year, having Rajon Rondo take the ball out of LeBron's hands and having that equity with that team to be able to do that. I don't know if Schroeder has enough to do that with LeBron. And I think they're going to need to do that to really go through the playoffs and be as successful as they were last year. So I think they will. So but fact. I think that there are a couple of...
You got fact. Yeah. I'm fact too. I think they're the team to beat. They are coasting right now, like most championship teams. They're having that kind of mid-season, quarter-season hangover where they're just kind of trotting along, making sure they get enough wins to be somewhere up the top at the end of the season. But, the LeBron story, it's all feel good. They want, people want him to go back to back, and he'll get that extra oomph, I think, to get there. Which follows up, fact or fake news, LeBron will be the MVP.
I'm going to say fake news.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to say fake news. I'm going to go Luka Doncic as the MVP this year.
Well, they need to get in the 10 first.
Yeah. No. I take that back. I'm going to go with Kevin Durant as the MVP this year.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I think the year he's having, the impact he's having on the game, I think I'm going to go with Kevin Durant. He's having a hell of a year. I think they're going to be good enough. Remember, they don't supposed to, wink, wink. They don't supposed to vote on the playoffs. They just do the regular season. I think those guys are going to really have a great regular season at least. And I think that, the numbers he's putting up are pretty good. So I think I'm going to go with Kevin Durant.
Well, I'm going with fact. I think LeBron will win it. I think the story around his aging body, I think he's doing very, very well for his age. We'll put that down to the $1 million he supposedly spends on his body. But yeah, sure. I just think that he's planted the seed last season with the media. I know there's a lot of media that are in Clutch's pocket and vice versa that will vote for him. Based on that, and he's deserving. Look, I'm not saying he's not deserving, don't get me wrong, but I think he's got a bit more push politically than Luka and Giannis. I don't think Giannis gets it again. And I think LeBron will get it because it'll be that feel-good story the NBA wants. Moving on. Fact or fake news. Now let's start with a fact or a fake, Mike. You don't need to go in. I think they will. It's fact or fake, motherfucker. So Mavs won't make the playoffs.
Oh, that's fake news. They'll make the playoffs. Again, they got COVID they're dealing with. They have Porzingis. Hopefully he could stay healthy. I think they'll get him right, but they got to start playing defense. They got to start being dedicated to defense more than 3 games at a time. They got to really do that, or they're going to have some problems. But look, there's a lot of schedule to be played. They've got an MVP candidate. They've got good role players that are back from their COVID stuff. They're going to start getting in shape. I think they're going to be in the playoffs. What about you?
Yeah, I think fake news. I think they'll be in the playoffs. I think the 10 helps them as well because it only leaves, gives you 2 extra spots with the playing game. But yeah, I think they'll make it. I think their roster's too talented. Porzingis is coming on kind of a bit slower than they thought. But if they can get everyone healthy, they should be a top 6, top 5 team in my opinion. So next one, fact or fake news, Bucks don't make the conference finals.
That's fact. I think their bench isn't as good as it was. Giannis with the shooting is too inconsistent. I think that there's some good teams up top in the East. I just think that lack of shooting, lack of go-to move, the free throws is just going to come back to haunt them with the bench. I don't see it happening for them. What about you?
Fact. I think they don't make the conference finals. I think they had a better team last season, top to bottom. And I think, they just seem to have a better balance. I think Holiday is an upgrade on Bledsoe, in my opinion. But I think when you look at the roster balance from top to bottom, I think they were better last season. So I will go fact. Last one, fact or fake news, Brooklyn don't make the finals.
I think that is, they do not make the finals.
It's fact or fake news? What you got?
I'm going to go with fact. They do not make the finals. I think that right now their bench isn't deep enough. I think there's going to be a lot of good teams in the East, especially at that time of year. I don't think they're going to make it. I don't think they defend. I think they just have too many issues. I think they're going to do really well in the regular season. They can win a couple of rounds, but I think by the conference final, I think they're going to wear out. I don't think they're going to have enough. What do you think?
I'm torn. It's a hard one. I think with a lot of these big threes, it usually takes a year. If you look at history, it takes a year, a little bit of a revamp in the off season, and then
hey, whoa! You gave me shit, motherfucker. You gave me shit, motherfucker.
I haven't answered yet. I'll go.
Go ahead, answer.
I'll go fake news. They'll make it.
Okay.
I think we've seen now they've had one of the big 3 miss the last few games. One of them's on a rotation to get rest or whatever it is, and they're still balling. They are a little thin. I think DeAndre is actually a good 5-man for their system. I think he fits in well. Physical rebounds, doesn't need the ball. Obviously, COVID and injuries will play a big part. But I'll go fake news. I think they will make the finals. I think seeing what KD did when he came back from that strained Achilles, when he came back for that 12-minute spurt against Toronto, that was one of the most amazing performances I've seen. And they don't need him to do that every minute of the game and every game. But when the nuts are on the line, you need a bucket. He's going to get it for you.
Yeah, in the way I gambled in college and how many times I lost and the way I lost, I would just go whatever I say, Bogues. Just say the fucking opposite, and you're gonna go home a fucking rich man. Well, I'm one of the worst gamblers.
I had Washington picked in the fucking playoffs. He killed me. Angry Russ
That's
killed me.
That's a good point.
Move on to the NBL real quick. I'm not sure if you followed it too much, but if you haven't, that's all right. But in my opinion, it's Melbourne United and the rest. They're clear first. They signed young kid named Jock Landale, who was playing in Lithuania. He was kind of fringe NBA guy. He had a call up ready to go last season. Then COVID hit. He's a very good young player. Went to St. Mary's. Chris Goulding, you've dealt with a little bit when you're with the Mavs. They've got a very, very good, overly talented, the most talented team on paper, the highest paid team. They're, the most salaries. I think they're over the cap a little bit, paying some tax probably, but they're number one. And then I think it's a free-for-all after that. I think I really don't know who's going to make it to top four here in Australia. There's 9 teams. One of the teams that was really good last season, Cairns, they're now 1-5, which is very, very surprising. They lost a guy named DJ Newell, who was an intangible 3-and-D guy, could put on the floor a little bit. They lost him because you could only have 2 imports. They kept Machado and Cam Oliver, and they've been horrible as a team. Their imports are getting their numbers, but they're not. I've watched a few of their games. They're not looking at anything. They're looking kind of like the Mavs, to be honest, right now. They're not playing any defense, and they're just trying to outscore guys, and they just don't have enough to do it. So the Illawarra Hawks are a team that finished bottom of the table last season, and they are 4-0 with a new coach, NBL legend Brian Goorjian, who's come back to Australia. They've been really fun to watch. They've got that young kid, not sure if you know him, Justinian Jessup from Boise State Pro. Lefty, Golden State have
I heard he's pretty good.
Golden State have his draft rights. Very young, still very young and learning the game, but he's got size for a shooter. He battles. He's got a high basketball IQ, and he's got a wet ball. Like he actually, teams here are basically topping him off everything. They're making him go to the basket on everything. They're not giving him any space, and he's still finding space to hit, step back threes, creating space for his threes. He's hitting, I thought more as a young fella, he'd have that feet set 3 down and then he'd figure out the rest. But, he doesn't look like missing when he shoots the ball. And I think I honestly think he could find time for the Warriors right now. I think he's young, he's learning the game, but they need shooters down there in Golden State, and you could put him in the corner, you're not leaving him. So he would really help their offense from that point of view. So I've been really surprised with how well he shoots the ball. So I have no doubt that he'll be over there at some capacity eventually. New Zealand Breakers, horror start for them. They're one of the favorites to make the 4. Few people picked them to win the championship. They're 0-2 at the moment. But it's kind of wide open. It's going to be real interesting for a lot of teams getting into that hub where it's a lot of games in a short amount of time for that cup, which will then count towards your regular season wins and losses. So I'll be watching that one closely. Hopefully you can get some games in down the track.
For sure. Have you heard anything about COVID testing or any cases or anything like that as far as what they're dealing with in the league?
No, look, keep in mind in Australia, I think we're at 100, low 100s for cases countrywide. So we have nothing compared to you guys. The only cases we're getting really is from international travelers bringing it in, but I think they're doing a better job with making sure those people don't pass it on to other people while they're in hotel quarantine. So we haven't really had any issues. There's been, I think there was a game today actually cancelled. The New Zealand Breakers were supposed to fly to Perth yesterday, and they had a few people actually get sick on the New Zealand Breakers with the flu. I don't know if it was COVID, but out of precaution, they cancelled that game. So New Zealand did not travel, and they stayed in Adelaide where they played their last game. And so they're trying to do the best they can. There is a lot of rules with the government. There's been some mask mandates for bench players in certain states, but other states not. So it's kind of, NBL is actually doing the best they can right now to manage kind of all the moving parts. And it's the same as the NBA. It's just, you just don't know what's going to happen between state to state and governors and premiers and presidents and prime ministers. It just changes at the drop of a hat, and you just got to be ready to do it.
Yeah. That Golden State kid, it just gets me thinking that how much of a good developmental system that NBA teams can have sending some guys that they draft that they don't want to bring in to Australia, better than sending them to China, better than Europe, because they could play minutes. The games are way better to play in the NBL than in the D-League. You've seen those D-League games.
I would send every kid I could over here. I mean, people think I'm biased. The reason why is not only for the basketball, it's going to toughen you up. You're in a different country. All right, we speak English, but it's still a different culture. There's still different things you got to learn along the way. It's different norms, different day-to-day, different level of refereeing, different level of physicality, different styles of play. Like there's a lot of teams here that pick up full court, they trap, they half court trap, that kind of high school, college type atmosphere with junky defenses at times. So I think it's phenomenal, and I think it punches you in the face as a young fella and gives you some adversity, which you want. You want your young draft picks coming over here. I mean, Dede Lozada is a prime example who we have at the Kings. He's a draft and stash by the Pelicans, and he's had some good games, but he's struggling. He's got hurt a fair bit, and he's he's facing that adversity where he's now got to punch through that and get to that next level for them to bring him back. And yeah, I mean, compared to the G League, it's no comparison. I think the G League is competitive from an individual basis at times with some of the stars. But as far as, team culture and doing the right thing and playing to win, I would send every kid I could over here. I think it does wonders for him.
I would too. Like when you go to Europe, it could be it depends on what the team is and the coach. You just don't know. With China, they could average 82 points a game, but they're not getting anything there. And I think when you go in Australia, you get great competition, you got good coaching, you got a country where they speak English, where it is a different culture, but it's probably a little bit better deal for them. And those D-League games, man, it's just getting your numbers, it's going up and down, it's trying to score 500 points, and it's like a video game where and it's a little bit more half court. In Australia, I think you get a better education of the game. I would keep exploring that. If I was an NBA team, I would definitely draft. If I'm a team that second round pick's not going to make my team anyway, I would send them. I would definitely want to send them over to Australia.
No doubt,
for sure.
And Jessup's with one of the all-time winningest NBL coaches of all time. He coached here when I was a kid. He was in China the last 10 years, but he's a fantastic coach. He'll get the best out
What's
of him.
What's his name?
Brian Goorjian. Yeah, so he's
okay. I've heard good things.
Yeah, and he's now the coach of our national team again. He was a coach in 04 and 08 for the Olympics, but just a legend in Australian basketball. He's an American that moved here back in the 80s to play and then transitioned to coaching. But he's in a great program. So, similar to a lot of guys. I mean, Sydney's a great program for DD, so they'll get better. And I guess it's a cheaper way for NBA teams to put their guy somewhere where they can, you want that adversity. You don't want a guy in the G League that's still close to home, maybe playing in his home city and comfortable and everything's rosy and, you're getting your stats and everything's cool. You don't really see what you want to see. And I think as a scout and a team, if you're going to bring a guy in with a second round pick a year or two into a stash, you want to have them go through the fire. And this is a perfect league for it. So we'll move on to the Q&A. We've got some interesting ones today. They're kind of a few curveballs, which is good, but long-time fan, loving the pod. Obviously, on the NBA coverage, we don't see coaches drawing up plays. It's more just the inspirational words we see. How many plays do coaches draw up in a game, or is the majority at the star's discretion? Also, did you get many plays called for you in Golden State, or mainly just as an option? Cheers and keep up the good work. Peter Connolly from Perth. So these days, you'd probably have more to say about this, but I noticed that a lot of the head assistants generally will have a play ready. So let's say we're talking about Golden State. Steve Kerr might say, hey, get me, when Alvin Gentry was there, it's like timeout, draw this play up for him if it's a quick hitter, and then the assistant would sketch it up. Steve would come and give his spiel to us and then pass the board to Steve and the play would be drawn up. Some coaches are completely hands-on. Scott Skiles, when I played for him, he had some of the best quick hitters and off the top of his head plays I've ever seen on a coach. So he did it all himself. But then I had Mark Jackson, who never drew up a play in his life. So, and that's not a knock. He just didn't. It's fact. He was more giving us the speeches about, a fighter in boxing that got knocked down and needs to get back up. That was our kind of timeouts with him. So every coach does it differently. Some invest more in their assistant coaches and some don't.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had Rick Carlisle for 6 years in Dallas, and he's probably the best ATO guy that I've ever seen. He sits down and rubs his calves and then draws something up and usually gets a great shot 99% of the time. But these days, from what I'm hearing from guys who scout games, teams are running less and less regular offense. It depends. Like out of a timeout, they'll run something that's drawn up by a coach. But for the most part, their playbooks are very much shrinking down. In Dallas, I think Carlisle put in a play every day. He had 1 million plays coming into it, and then he'll put in a new play or two every day almost. And so he's a big offense guy. But some coaches, I think it's just coach discretion. I think some will have lesser. I think the way the game's played with 5 out, I think it's more just like continuity of just like coming down, spacing the floor, run and pick and roll until you get the matchup you want, and then just put your head down and go. I think there's less and less plays being made and being drawn up as far as like besides the ATO stuff. I think in game, it's just more of a free-flowing game.
Flow and read, yeah. And then to the end of the question, you asked if I had any plays called for me in Golden State. So it wasn't necessarily called by coaches, but playing with Steph and Clay, I knew that if I set a couple of good pin down screens, which would mean me trailing from the top of the key in transition, and I said kind of a wide pin down to Steph or Clay in the corner to come off a down screen. I knew if I could get Steph or Clay 2 or 3 threes wide open because I knocked his guy pretty heavily on the screen, I'd get 1 or 2 slips out of that a game, and that was kind of my play. I'd give my kind of an eye motion to Steph, who had the ball, pin down on Clay, and I'd slip to the basket early and I'd have a lob dunk. So you can see plenty of those clips for alley-oop dunks, but that was kind of my play that we'd kind of just synchronize with ourselves. And honestly, when I was with Golden State, a lot of our stuff was done, like Pro said, in the flow of things. Steph might say, hey, your guy's showing a little hard, slip it early, or hey, set the rescreen after your first screen, they're blitzing me, set it the other way again, or whatever it is. And that's kind of the game within the game that you have to play. If you're relying on your coach for every play, you're not going to win many games. But we'll go on to the next one. This one's an interesting one. For better or worse, you've always been keen on exposing a good conspiracy theory. Sometimes wrong, sometimes right. I can say that. It may not be the level of the Yugoslav spies infiltrating Melbourne social clubs, which I discussed on the My Journey pod, but I have it on very good authority that Milwaukee Bucks staffers posed as fans to post pro-team propaganda on message boards in an effort to suppress the well-deserved criticism hardcore fans were hurling at the organization during your tenure there. So that would have been 2006 to 2012. Years later in Philadelphia, we saw a similar dynamic as the GM went up in flames over posts he and his wife had made on a burner account. Sure, remember that. That was interesting. I'm wondering what message building actually looks like behind closed doors at the NBA level. Do team executives, PR, come to you and say, look, our fans are upset with someone we just drafted. For instance, the example he uses is a Chinese guy who doesn't want to play in Milwaukee, which happened when I was there with Iwan Lian, who clearly said, if you guys draft me, I don't want to come. They drafted him anyway, which was a whole other story. And then the PR comes to you and says, can you pump him up in the media or put them at ease? Or 2 of our stars can't stand each other. One is out the door this summer. Can you make it seem like all is well? And so we get through to the playoffs without any issues from the media. How does it work when you are as a player as part of the organizational messaging? So that's from Charlie in Chicago. Yeah, I mean, the PR department doesn't just bluntly tell you what to say. They'll try to divert you to a certain path, if that makes sense. They'll try to word something like, hey, if they ask you about this, an example would be when guys were asked about Daryl Morey and the China comments was, you remember what the answer was, right, Pro, when they got asked about what's going on in China or Hong Kong? Mm-hmm. Do you remember the answer?
You tell me.
I don't know enough about the situation to comment. That would have been a NBA PR memo that came to teams. PR people with clubs then would have went to their players and said, we don't want you to answer it. If you have to give an answer, this is what you say. So yes, they definitely will prep you with things to say and some talking points. As far as the Bucks staffers, I don't remember that. I don't remember anyone that I knew posting. I'm sure there were. I do remember a funny story, Pro, that we just went through a period where after I was there for about 2 or 3 years, our first round picks were out of the league within a couple of years. Like it was, we did very well in the second round, had Luke Marbute 1 year and whatnot, but our first round picks, like
Joe Alexander?
We had Joe Alexander, we had Iwan Lian, who was bounced a couple of years later. Brandon Jennings was decent, but the fans were becoming increasingly frustrated, and they put together a protest where they wore brown paper bags over their head.
Oh boy, shit!
I think it was about 15 of them, 20 of them. And it was right about when Twitter started, so I kind of was getting some messages about it, and I kind of knew, and I was like, no way they're going to do it. And they ended up kicking them out of the arena, but that just was around that time. I'm not sure, if people were actually posting on message boards, but it would not surprise me. I mean, small market will try to do everything they can to keep the messaging on focus, but the PR department has a lot to say, and if they think you're a loose cannon like myself, that might not give that political answer, they just won't put you up for media that day. Just try to hide you for a week or so and give it to someone who will say the right thing. But I'm sure you've dealt with that before, Pro.
Yeah, I've heard stories. I mean, I think when there are certain things that are certain big issues that are going around the league, I think PR definitely would say, when Dallas, I forgot a couple of the big things that we've had, but like Donnie Nelson and Carlisle and the guy said, hey, look, have free discretion to post what you want or answer what you want. But, just understand that it's a big issue these days. And, just sort of make sure you understand how it's going to impact the people that read it. I've heard other teams, like they'll have interns that, try to vote for their NBA players for All-Stars like multiple times, call radio stations under fake names and try to like pump up things that they've done. But, Yeah, not many media conspiracies when I was in Dallas on stuff or anything like that. But other teams, you definitely hear about some things that they did to try to, have a little tomfoolery or a little chicanery in the mix.
Yeah, it's like anything. It's like politics. It's like government. It's like Hollywood. It's, if you can change the PR narrative, you can divert attention from one thing to another thing, and that you'd be silly to think that doesn't happen in sport. It does. So next one. Bogues, I enjoy listening. Did you write this one in, by the way, Pro? I'm going to read this out, but I think you might have sent this one. I absolutely enjoy listening to your humble beginnings and insight into the NBA. I love the honesty and rawness of the podcast. Mike, he sounds like an awesome character. He's hilarious with some of the stuff that comes out of his mouth. There you go. Sure you didn't write that?
I know there's about 10,000 calories that go into my mouth. I don't know about what's coming out of it, but no, I definitely didn't write it. I've got an AOL instant messenger still, so I don't even know how to use email, man.
All right, we'll get to my question. Playing NBA in the US, did you form a tight bond with other Australian NBA players? Like, if you're playing against them, did you get a chance to both catch up and have a yarn? Secondly, how did you feel when you got that call up to play for the Golden State Warriors about having an awesome NBL season in Australia? Did you take your family over with you for the short stint? Can't wait for the next episode. Thanks, Regina in Cairns. Maybe you've been to Cairns. Do you know Regina in Cairns, Pro?
I probably did. I probably gave to some type of charity that she was running herself. So I think when I gave $500, they said we'll give you a nice email on the Rogues Bogues podcast.
You got it right. It's not Rogues and Bogues anymore. It's Rogue Bogues. Beautiful.
Well, it takes me fucking 3 hours to make minute rice. I'm a dumb fuck. What do you want from me? Sometimes I fuck things up.
I just thought the less S's for you, the better.
No doubt. Shit.
Anyway, to answer the question, Regina, I really enjoyed going back for that second stint with the Warriors. It was kind of just a blessing in disguise. It kind of felt really good to go back there and see some of the old teammates and be part of that again. It was disappointing we couldn't win it. I did take my whole family. I wouldn't have went otherwise. To be around without them would just be too hard, especially, I had a newborn at the time, and then, the other one was 2.5, 3. So important time in their lives more than basketball would be. So that was part of that decision. We ended up overpaying for a big house for 3 or 4 months, but it was well worth it. Nice pool and everything, and made sure that they were as comfortable as possible. As far as the Australian side of things, we do. If I get to a city, let's say we're playing in Miami, or let's say I'm going to Utah, and I get in tonight for tomorrow's game and Joey's in town, if they're not playing that night on a back-to-back, we text back and forth and usually catch up for dinner the night before a game. If we didn't have the opportunity to do that, which sometimes you don't just because of NBA scheduling, we definitely have a quick chat before the game for our pre-game shoot-around. But yeah, most of the time we try to get a meal together, catch up, talk, and it's just good to hear, an Australian accent. We kind of tell stories about what's going on with our teams respectively, and then it's weird because then you're competing against each other the next night. So you kind of want to have that professionalism with your own group of guys where you're not, where I'm not being too friendly with Joey because I want to kick his ass. So that's one you can't answer because you're not Australian, Pro.
Yeah, but you did hang out with me and Brokeroff the last time when you were in Golden State. It was the last hurrah. Last time you and I were going to be in the NBA. I knew I was getting fired in about a week, and you knew you were probably gone after a week. So it was the last hurrah. We had sushi in that way overpriced place. And
that was great. Hakkasan in San Francisco, fantastic spot.
Yeah, come on. I eat at fucking Burger King and McDonald's. They don't have sushi on that fucking menu. I can't afford that shit.
For anyone that goes to Hakkasan, get the crispy duck salad. It is absolutely fantastic. They got, I think, Vegas, LA, San Fran. But I do remember that. Good old Rowdy. Hopefully he can. You speak to him? I haven't spoke to him for a little bit. Is he going to get a call up, you think?
I think if I had to guess, he's probably just waiting until the summer. Probably start it next year. I think he tried with tried to go to Philly early. I think the European stuff was a little dried up this year. Maybe he can get something on with an international team. But I think he's probably going to chill with family this year and then rekindle it next year.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked that he's not even a 13 to 15 guy on a roster. He shoots the piss out of the ball.
Some of these guys on rosters, it's unbelievable. And with what he brings to the table as a shooter and a great guy, who's a great professional. I find it really odd, especially how they value the 3-point shot and how they wouldn't give the guy a contract. But you never know, something could happen. But I expect him definitely to see him somewhere next year, if not at the end of this year. But
I think Philly could use him. I think he's a good insurance policy for Philly at that. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 roster spot.
Look, we're talking New Orleans, who doesn't have a shooter. There's plenty of teams that don't have shooting that definitely could use him. I'm as high on him as a professional and a guy who could actually get in a game and do something, as far as...
And a great guy, great locker room guy, not a dickhead, you do whatever you ask, keep his mouth shut. I can't speak more higher of him, but it's just mind scratching when you have some of these guys as your role players who can then cause issues when they don't get playing time.
Without question.
All right, next one. You've named names and hilariously given a few jabs to other athletes in your podcast. In return, who would you not want to start their own podcast and spill the beans on you? Chris Anderson for Brisbane. To be honest, I think we're probably one of the most self-deprecating podcasts out there, bro. I don't think we give two shits, really. I've spoken about my free throw woes. I've spoken about, in the My Journey podcast about doing dumb shit and deserving the consequences. So no one, to be honest with you, like there's nothing anyone can go on a podcast and say about me that I wouldn't put on this podcast myself, bro.
Yeah. I don't really have a guy. I mean, I'm pretty open and self-deprecating. And besides like Dirk, who could, Zaza Pachulia wanted to kill me one year. He actually asked a player from my room number. So maybe if he had a podcast, he could tell you how I was in the fetal position praying that he wouldn't kill me for about a week. But besides that, I don't think any other player I would really fear having a podcast about me.
But at the end of the day, what are they going to say? Like, it's the same old stuff we've all probably heard before, like stuff that they say about you or stuff they say about me, whatever it is. It's like, yeah, like, cool, we've heard that before. Like, what else you got? So it's just kind of, yeah, quite honestly, I'm not, thanks for your question, Chris, but I thought it was an interesting one because I really don't care. And even if someone did, I'd have a crack back at them after they had a crack at me and then get on with life. And I think that's what it's all about.
Without question.
Next one, Bogues and Pro love the show, Cobber. So Cobber in Australia, Pro is kind of like mate, slang for mate. And a quick shout out to Pro, who has instantly become a great source of knowledge and laughs along the way. Wanted to ask Pro and yourself about shooting, specifically form. How much do coaches preach perfect form, or is it more relative to the shooter's ability? As in, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or do coaches now, are they now content with them being comfortable and just improving consistency? Cheers, Tom from the Shire in Sydney. You can have this one, Pro. Go for it.
Yeah, I think it depends on how your coach is wired. You might have a coach that doesn't really care, like a Doc Rivers who wouldn't care how a guy shot. Obviously, it's result. He'd let the assistant or the assistants that work with the player, deal with the shot. And I think any coach who knows comfort, being comfortable and confident are the two biggest things you can be as a shooter. Obviously, you want good technique, and that's great. We talked about technique on this show. But I think that letting the player just sort of, as long as he has a regular routine, he's working on it, he has a coach that works on it with him and holds him accountable and gives him feedback constantly is great. Then you'll have coaches that try to micromanage and change your shot every other day. And I think that that's really tough for a player to do. I've seen that happen. And it's just really tough when a coach is constantly changing your stuff, constantly, trying to like fix this, fix that. And it really affects, again, being comfortable and confident. And I think that's a problem. Most problems on staffs, on player teams all over the world are there's like, a player, especially one that really can't shoot well, he'll get 9 different opinions of how to shoot the ball from coaches and players on their same team. There's not like one way they teach shooting, and then there's not one voice. And that's why San Antonio's so good with Chip England, because like he teaches shooting and everybody just shuts the fuck up. And he's the only guy who teaches shooting. And then he might have a couple assistants that work with him, that work right under him, that report right back to him. But he's so good because his coach allows him to teach. I worked with a guy, Peter Patton, who's one of the best shooting instructors I've ever seen, shooting coaches he works in Dallas, and he's very good with stuff. He doesn't change things every other day. He's very consistent with the way he teaches and his approach. But it all depends on the coach. And I think, again, when you're talking about shooting, being consistent with the shooter, how you teach, and not worrying about result right away, and make sure they're comfortable and confident in shooting the way they shoot. But again, it depends on how the coach is wired that's teaching them.
And it's probably more, if you're going to change someone's shot, it'd be an off-season project, in my opinion. If you try to start messing with dudes in season, I think it can. I kind of went through it a little bit with Dallas, to be honest. I mean, Carlisle was big on micromanaging. That's no surprise. And like you said, then there was another shooting coach there. Then I was working with you, and it was like, depending on who you were working out with, it was a coach that wanted you to shoot a different way or try something different. And I don't know if you remember the Quincy Acey story.
Yeah, I do.
With Dallas.
Oh, no, not Quincy Acey. No, I don't. I don't know the Quincy story.
I think you'll remember when I tell it. So Quincy Acey was unbelievable motor, like one of the hardest playing guys you'll find. 3-point shot was kind of inconsistent at times. Streaky, could knock him down, but wasn't his strength. He was how tall was he? 6'6", 6'7", but played the 4, but just long arms, physical, what you wanted, right? For a role player. And I mean, Rick Carlisle took him over as a pet project to help him shoot. And Rick's big thing was, because Dirk did it, which is one of the greatest shooters of all time, but the only guy I've known to do it, Dirk shoots with the seams of the basketball. So he doesn't put his hand the traditional way. He puts his kind of shooting fingers along the seams. So he's touching the seams. So Rick tried to do the same thing with Quincy. And Quincy was struggling. Like he was spraying all over the place, air balls left, right. There was kind of no consistency because it was kind of in his head at that point. So he was becoming frustrated. And I guess one practice, he went back to just shooting how he felt comfortable, and Rick gave him the whole spiel. And Rick got a basketball and traced his hand on that basketball. Do you remember this, bro? So got a shot.
Oh yeah, he did that with some players. He traced the ball around their fingers. Yeah, I did remember this. But what happened? So it's basically traced his hand where it should be every time he shoots the ball. So whenever Q worked out with Rick, he could only shoot with that ball, right? So then Q's like fucking head spinning, like, I just want to come in and get some shots up and work on my game. This dude, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of breaking my balls a little bit. It's in my head now. I'm thinking about it too much. I don't know if you remember, we ended up trading him or waiving him. I think we traded him to Brooklyn in a package deal, and we sent him the ball via FedEx. I didn't know they sent him the ball.
Yeah,
but I remember him having that ball, but I didn't remember us sending it to him.
They sent him the ball, they deflated it, put it in the post, and sent it to him to the facility in Brooklyn. And he sent a group text laughing his ass off about it. But just a funny story that I just remember because of the shooting thing. But I think I'll just finish up with, it's an off-season thing. If you're going to change a player's shot, you want to do it at a young age if possible. It's very hard to do mid-career, but if you're going to do it, it's something you need to do mid-season, just because it's a repetition thing that's very hard to do in season. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, think about it. Like a shooter shoots, we charted every shot that a player would shoot during the season in an NBA season on workouts. Dwight Powell was the highest every year. Dwight Powell shoot 25,000 shots a season, like in workouts and pregame workouts. So you're talking about somebody, like, if he didn't change his shot for 5 years, that means you take it at least 125,000 shots one way. And now you're trying to change that. Like, that's the biggest problem with changing your shot during the season. When games happen and you have something that you have to perform in, you're always going to go back to the old way. And during the off season, you need to really shoot the ball 15, 20, 25,000 times in a 3 or 4 month period, the new way, breaking it down from the first time to the last, it takes about 12 to 18 solid months to really consistently change a shot, in my opinion. And it takes a while. So, like, I don't care about what you do during the season. If you got a game that night and you spend 5 hours shooting a different way in the game, when there's fans and, you're actually keeping score, you're going to always go back to that old way. So whatever you do during that morning time or whatever is going to just be pissed away. You got to, like Bogue said, you got to change it during the off season.
Yeah, no doubt. Otherwise, it'll just mind screw you the whole time. But next one, Ben Russell from Langwarren hosts a podcast about NBL fantasy. It's called the Basketball Blokes Podcast. I've always been interested in following. I know athletes get driven mad when people attack them about their performance because it affects their fantasy team essentially, or their points. With the growth of daily fantasy, which is basically gambling, this would have only intensified. That being said, fantasy sport has been a factor in increased broadcast rights, particularly in the NFL. So the players would be getting some benefit. How often would people get into your mentions because you cost them a bet or a fantasy game? And with more and more states legalizing sports gambling, do you think this will get worse? Are NBA players trained on how to cope with this? For me, I used to get really pissed off when people used to tweet me about fantasy points, because I'd be like, I don't live in fucking fantasy. I live in reality. And I know I just played like shit. I give no shit.
Well, wait a minute now. You're in the fucking NBA. If there's no more fantasy world than that, living in that fucking deal.
You're right, but it used to get to me a little bit, but I understand it. I've done fantasy before just to experience it with an NBL team ages ago, like probably 10 years ago. I get the frustrations, but There's no one, NBA players, professional athletes, when we have a bad game, we know we've had a bad game. We don't need some idiot saying, you cost me the fantasy league championship. It's like, yeah, well, I'm living in the reality and I just had 20,000 people at a game booing me because I missed the last shot or whatever it was. So we get it. It is frustrating. You are right. It does contribute to a portion of our salary and the growth of professional sport. But it is a little frustrating because, we're not part of that whole fantasy thing. And especially for myself, like I wasn't a huge stat guy. I mean, I put up big numbers early in my career at times and 2020 games and all that. But with the Warriors, for me, my role was pretty clear and outlined. And I just tried to do that best of my ability. So sometimes guys with their fantasy teams would get a little frustrated, but that's a part of what we deal with on a daily basis. The gamblers are the worst though. Man, the gamblers, I remember we played in Brooklyn one year and I was in the game late and I turned the ball over. I threw it over Steph's head out of bounds, like just a horrible pass, went over his head. And it was a crucial possession. I think we were down 1 or down 2. We didn't even get a shot up. And then they came back, they knocked down free throws and they won. Man, I guess I fucked the line up and I had like basically death threats on social media for like a good 2 or 3 days. And the gamblers, yeah, they're on the more aggressive side of of social media posts after you cost them a game.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to Clay Travis, right? And he was talking about like fans that tweet at NBA athletes and some of the stupid shit that they would send to them. You got to understand, like, do you think about what you tweet or what you try to send, or when you try to interact with NBA players or professional athletes when you see them out and about? Like, Travis actually had a good thing with Abraham Lincoln. Like, Abraham Lincoln would send, he's an American president. He would send letters, like, with all the journalists that would write bad things about him. He would, like, go back at him in letters. But what he would do is he would write the letter and he would put it in his desk for 6 days. And then he would actually pull it out and read the letter again and think about it before he sent it. And about 90% of the letters he probably didn't send, because he fucking thought about it and had like common sense. Like, yeah, I was mad at the time. It was good to get it there, like write it down, but don't send it because it's fucking stupid. Like, that's sometimes when like they tweet at players, like they don't give a fuck about fantasy. They can give a fuck less about fantasy or what you think about them based on that. It's just sometimes you just gotta like, you got to take a knee on it and just say, fuck it. I'm not going to send this bullshit. Like, let's relax. Like, look, they have a bad game. They don't need you. They're going to have some fucking coach breaking down film, 18 fucking media people busting their balls in the media. They're going to have to answer to this and answer to that, being on a trading block. You think they give a fuck about Ed Saworski from fucking Baltimore that's pissed at him because he cost him his daily fantasy? I mean, sometimes you just got to think and have some common sense before you try to send something out to a player,
Yeah, and I mean, there's the argument of we pay your salary. You hear that a fair bit. We pay your salary. We have a right to critique you, and I'd agree with that. You definitely have a right to critique, but I think I don't really care too much. I'll fire back at people that go at me, but there are some athletes that do get affected by mainly when it's abusive or threatening. Like people say shit about your family, or I wish you should kill yourself, that kind of stuff. That's probably where you draw the line a little bit, but that's just the negative of social media. Any idiot can have an account. You don't have to validate that you are the name on the account. You can put a nigga as your profile picture and you can just tweet abuse. But you also, from the flip side, have to think what kind of life that person's living if that's kind of their daily being, right? Like, so you kind of think about from that lens, like they're probably not doing too well in life. So just let them be.
It's unbelievable, some of these people, how they act when they could be the toughest person in real life and they get to be around an NBA athlete and they're like a 12-year-old schoolgirl.
Oh, it's
unbelievable.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, to me, I try to be like, act like, even before I got to the NBA, when I saw NBA players or whatever, I tried to act like I've been there before. Like, they don't want to, you see 100 people come up to them and act like a, fucking moron to them. Go up to them and just say, like, if you want to give them a little nod or whatever, hey, and that's it. But try to carry on like you actually know the person. Think about that. Like, think about you're out with your girl or your wife or whatever. You have some, 20 people coming up like they know you. You're trying to just have a meal. And then not only are they just trying to like monopolize your time on, sometimes with stupid questions and whatnot. But imagine like going at him about like, missing 12 shots last night. Like, come on, pal. Like, what do you want me to say right now? Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah,
like,
that's hard.
I understand why players get frustrated.
Oh, definitely. It is hard, and that's a part of the whole monopoly of being a professional athlete. You kind of sign up for, whether it's right or wrong is a different argument, but you sign up for not having your own time. And, I've had people take, they sit next to me at a table at dinner, and you can clearly see the phone is angled towards the side, towards me. And I'm like, about to chow down a piece of steak. I've got steak on my fork, and they're taking photos of me. Just like,
I hate
a few
that
times
shit.
I'm like, hey, do you want to just get a normal photo at the end of my meal? I've got no problem doing it, but like, do you really want a photo with me eating some fucking ribeye? Like, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do with that? What are you gonna do with it?
That shit is scary, man. Like, I don't know how it is now. My last year, I hung around a little bit with Luka, and that was before the phenomenon really started. But like, we would go out like once in a while, not a lot. He would usually just stay in, but we'd go out like in Indianapolis. We would go out to a steakhouse, and like in the drive from the hotel to the steakhouse was like maybe a mile and a half. And we had this dude chase our car, our Uber, all the way there. And like, I'm getting out of the car, and this guy's like a schoolgirl, like excited, like shivering. I thought he was going to pull something out, like a knife or something. It's a scary deal with some of these people. Like, here's one thing, Bogues. You play in the NBA forever. You got people listening to the podcast that are big time fans of basketball. If, and I know like you don't want to entertain a million people that come up to you, but if they were going to come up to an NBA player, what's the best way to come up with them to sort of like maximize that 8 seconds interaction with that player without like making that player feel a little weird or, making it, it's already going to be weird, don't get me wrong, but how would you do it? How would you instruct like regular fans to come up to NBA players?
Well, it's time and place, and depending on what setting you're in too, like have some sort of social norms about yourself. So if I've been out before just for a walk with the kids, and I've got a toddler in one arm, and I'm holding the 4-year-old's arm and trying to chase them, stop them from running along the road. And then some dude's like, hey, can I get a photo? And I'm like, mate, like, I'm not putting my toddler down next to a main road. I don't want my kids in the photo. Like, I don't want to say no to you. I'd take the photo happily, but it's not the right situation, right? But in other circumstances, like there's a lot of people that do it respectfully. I think the dickheads are a minority. Maybe 10 to 15% of people are probably a little bit more demanding than they should. But most people, excuse me, I'm a big fan of yours. I followed you from college. Just want to say good luck tomorrow. Like, I respect that. You've used your manners. You haven't interrupted a conversation, and you're not making it about yourself. Whereas, one night we were in Charlotte, and I went out for dinner with I think it was myself, Steph, Draymond, Clay, a few other guys, and a family came up to Steph and wanted a photo, and we just politely said like, hey, like, no problem, just can you wait till the end of the meal? So they went and sat down, and then came back 10 minutes later like, oh, can we have that photo now? And Steph's literally got fucking food on his potatoes on his fork, like, and I kind of fired up because I listen, like, I kind of said to him, if you wait for us to finish the meal in about 30-40 minutes, we're happy to take the photo. Oh no, we want it now. Well, it's like, well, you can't fucking have it now. Like, it's the dude's eating. Like, he's in the middle of a meal. Like, show some sort of basic respect. Like, if you're going to put him out, you can put yourself out for 30 minutes. Just wait out the front in the lobby of the restaurant, and when we walk out, he'll happily take a photo with you. But that goes back to people. It's kind of they want what they want, and they want it now, and that's the minority. But most people that are respectful would understand that, and that's you just got to deal with that on a daily basis. And it's just unfortunate. And even if I see people I'm a fan of, whatever it may be, sometimes you can just tell it's not the right social setting. The guy's carrying a baby, or he's cleaning his dog poop up on the street, whatever it is. There's like some settings where you're just like, this is a bit too much. I'm just going to let it ride,
Yeah, you got to be self-aware, right? And just sort of read the situation. Like, and that's a completely different thing from those types of people than to the people when you get into a city at like 2:30 in the morning and there's like 60 people waiting for autographs when you get to the hotel. Those guys are a completely different, different sort of entity of weird dudes.
And that's for money, that are trying to forget. So there's probably
that's all money.
1% of them might be a fan, but 99% of them are trying to get you to sign whatever they've got, and then it goes straight on eBay the next morning, which I respect the hustle, but then those guys I've heard them abuse guys for not signing, like, oh, you suck anyway, I didn't want your autograph. And you're just like, really? You're here at 2:30 in the morning, you just yelled his name for 5 straight seconds. He said no, or it's 2:30 in the morning, and now you hate him. Like, really? It turned that quickly?
Yeah, that's going to be an issue at some point with NBA security. There's going to be something that happens at a hotel. Just because, like, you're catching the team sleeping when they're off a plane. They're coming off a back-to-back, and they're getting into a city at 2:33 in the morning. Security guys just trying to get people into the hotel. You get those people sort of like in that little like roped off area. You're going to have something that's happened. I think, it's just too open of an area, and they allow too many people,
there's nothing they can
into
do,
that situation.
That's the problem, because it's, I guess, the laws in the States. Like, you can essentially, so for those listening, when we get to hotels at whatever time, we could get there at 4 p.m., we could get there at 12 a.m. It could be after a game. We're flying into that city and getting there at 3 a.m. There's fans that wait out the front of the hotels, and they've got all the stuff they want autographed, and they sell it later, whatever it is, right? So most hotels now will rope off an area to at least keep it somewhat safe. But I've seen some hotels try to stop that completely and say no loitering in front of the hotel. So what these dudes do is they just wait around the corner. And as soon as they see that big Greyhound bus or whatever the bus is pull up, they sprint to the front of the door, and these people can't do anything. So it's hard to stop. And these people will be there in Arizona in 100-degree weather outside. They'll be there in -20 in Milwaukee with beanies and gloves on, waiting for those autographs. And it is interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. It's in your face. I haven't had run-ins, but I've seen guys get into push and shove matches. I mean, in Toronto one year, we had Brandon Jennings' rookie year. We had a car follow our bus to the airport, and in Toronto, it's not. You have to go through the public part of the terminal because it's a different country. You can't go straight to your private jet like you can if you're flying in domestic in the US. So a guy basically ran after Brandon Jennings and grabbed Brandon by the backpack to stop him going through. And then, it was on at that point. I basically grabbed him by the collar of the shirt and threw him off Brandon Jennings. I still remember it because I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like, don't put your hands on him. Like, he said he didn't want to sign, go on your merry way. And that could have got ugly real quick, right? Like if I did something more, like punched him or hit him, all of a sudden I'm in trouble. So you're right, man. Like it's one of those things that something's going to happen eventually, but there's nothing you can do about it. There's really nothing you can do about it.
No.
So, I mean, we could do a podcast just on crazy NBA fans, crazy NBA, we call them girl friends in quotation marks. We might have to do a spin-off.
It's crazy.
We'll do a spin-off eventually on that. Last question. I thought you'd like this one. It's to do with food. So food in the States. Hey mate, just wondering how you found the food coffee in your time in the US. We traveled to the States frequently pre-COVID. The hardest part for us was finding a decent breakfast brunch and a good cappuccino. Potty's awesome. You guys are both great. Keep it up. Rory from Brisbane. So, Pro, in Australia, kind of the brunch long breakfast is kind of a big thing. You have a coffee and whatever, especially on weekends. Similar there, but a little bit different in Australia. So I will go on record and say America has probably the worst coffee in the world. I'm not sure why. It's just not high on the priority list there. Proper coffee. I'm not talking about the gas station shit where you fill up a gallon or a liter of coffee for your long truck drive between Tennessee and Houston. But I struggle with that. The food, you've just got to know where to go. Look, if you're in the Midwest or some small towns, it might be hard to find a salad. It might be hard to find something healthy.
That's my problem. It's hard for me in 30 NBA cities to really find salads. That's why I went against it, to be honest. But go ahead, Phil. I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, but I'd agree. I mean, look, like anything, you gotta make the effort sometimes. The bigger cities, there's more variety. I definitely love the food in Australia more than the US. I feel like the US, in Australia, it's like this to an extent, but in the US, it's predicated much more towards fast, quick, easy. Not a lot of people cook in the States anymore. It's starting to come like that a little bit in Australia, but yeah, I'd agree. The coffee there, Starbucks is, I mean, there were some road trips like Oklahoma City where Starbucks was kind of the only coffee you could get, and it was hard. It was kind of, I'd pinch my nose and just shoot it down like a shot of fucking vodka. It was so bad, but just something you had to deal with. At home, I bought my own coffee machine that grinded my own beans. I found a few good bean suppliers, and I'd usually have better coffees at home than cafe. But bit of an issue culturally, but that's just something you have to deal with. Pro, you have any issues with food over there?
No, I never really have issues with food, obviously. But I think with NBA teams, with NBA players and staff, when you're going on the road, you're sort of habitual people. Like, in Milwaukee where you're going to go, in LA where you're probably going to go. You don't really venture off. I'm very habitual. Like I knew in LA, I would go to, Manhattan Beach. I think I met you with my boy Sev.
Yep.
Yeah. So like Manhattan Beach, I knew I was always going to go to the same spot. I knew in Boston, which I'm from, I know I'm going to go to the Italian section and eat. So it's like, I'm not a coffee guy, so I don't drink it. But like with food stuff, it's just, the problem is you can't really eat at the hotel for me because I wasn't making great money. Like I remember my first road trip in Dallas, I was breaking down film for Vince Carter and I got like cookies and milk just for a snack. And the thing cost me like $37.50 for a shot of milk and a fucking like 3 Oreos. It was like $37.50. I say, so then you're like, you're not eating at the hotel because it's like there's like $90 in charge, like 80% of your money is all on taxes and delivery charges. I'm like, fuck that. So I'm walking out and I'll just find a place. I'm not going to get Uber Eats. I'm totally against Uber Eats. There's too many memes of like people taking pictures in bathroom stalls with some Uber Eats fucking bag next to them in a fucking stall. There's no way I'm going to get a third party. So I think by the city, if you have a bad experience on the road, like to a spot, you'll try to find something else. But I think for me, at least in my 6 years in the league traveling, like certain city, you knew where you're going to go. You knew you're going to go game day. It changes. How about you, Bobes? Were you very habitual with the places you went on the road, or you would like to try different spots?
Yeah, I mean, once you found a good spot, like say you went down south, you'd know a few good barbecue spots. That was a cool thing. So every city had a different cultural norm about it, food-wise. So you'd kind of experience that. Beignets in New Orleans, get the donuts, like all that kind of stuff. So that was always cool. And I think that's part of even traveling the world is trying the local cuisine that they're known for because it's usually the best you're going to have. But for the most part, if we got in late, like if we landed at 5, 6 p.m., I'd generally just go to the hotel and get room service. But you're right, man, it is expensive. I remember we were in New York one road trip and I went and got some food from a restaurant across the road, just some takeaway, some takeout. And I forgot to get myself some utensils, a knife and fork, a plastic knife and fork wasn't in the bag. So I get back to my room, about to watch a game, kick my feet up, eat my meal. So I call down to the front desk and I say, hey, I just need some cutlery, just a knife and fork, whatever. So they knock on the door. I answer the door. He hands me the rolled up knife and fork in the napkin.
Sure.
And then hands me a leather pouch. And I'm like, what is this? So it's a bill. it was $13.
Unbelievable.
It was $13 for utensils, man. So I was looking at the dude. I was like, are you serious? Like this is gonna cost me $13. Yeah, so we have a surcharge on the utensils. Sorry, blah, 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 because you didn't order from the hotel. Okay, cool. So you know what I fucking did? I took those fucking utensils with me on principle.
Yeah.
I took the knife and fork, bent the shit out of it, walked out of the hotel the next day and threw that shit in the bin. But I was just like, man, like,
yeah, this boy,
you $13? Like I'm not cheap by any means. I'll overpay for meals, man. Like if it's the experience for me is fantastic, I'll pay for filet mignons, for Wagyus, but for a knife and fork that I'm gonna have to give back to you, like I'm not rolling with that. Not rolling with it at all.
Yeah, there was more DNA on that than an LA crime scene. I hope you did throw that the fuck away. But, I agree. The hotels that NBA players and teams stay at, it's like the movies where like you got to tip 18 people and they charge you for everything. Every little thing that you do, they charge you for. And if you don't put a credit card down, the team will charge you for it. The team will pick it up on their credit card and then charge you for it down the road. But it's crazy with the different things that you can get anything you want usually at these hotels, but they charge you an arm and a leg plus delivery plus service charge plus extra tax. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
My first few years in the league, I didn't realize that the tip was included in the bill. So how the fuck would I know that? I come from college, didn't know much about tipping coming from Australia because we don't tip here. So like the dudes were like really nice, like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, thank you. If you need anything else, let me know. And then like, I think like a year in, someone's like, I don't know how the conversation came up, but they're like, the tip's included in your bill, right? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, read the bottom of that shit. There's a service charge. That's the tip. It's 20% usually in those hotels. So I was tipping 40% at times because I was doubling up and I had no idea these dudes were like loving me. Like, we'll get you anything you want. Call us. Like, fuck.
No.
Like, at least I helped someone. I can't feel too bad, but I was like, man, getting fleeced.
It's unbelievable. How about those guys that like when you already get a $14.50 tip on like French fries, you got to tip them $14 for, and then they're like looking at you stupid, like when you don't put the extra tip down.
Oh yeah,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, so for people at home, when you get these bills in these high-end hotels, still has all the charges, and they hand you the pouch, and they stand there staring at you. So they basically know, like, if you haven't taken some time to fill something in before you sign your name, they know you haven't extra tipped on top of the tip. So I've definitely had some where they're just staring at you. I'd usually still tip a little bit just because I felt guilty sometimes. So I'd give them a couple extra bucks on top of the 20% tip I'm already paying. But man, those eyes can guilt the shit out of you, man.
Oh, no shit. No kidding. I'm like, I try to like put my hand over my eyes and I'm like, all right, here, take it. It's just
get out of my room.
It's like, cause you get like, get the fuck out of here. Like you get $144 a day on the road in the NBA. Every team, every staff member that travels, they'll get per diem of $144 a day, give or take. And that shit goes real quick when you got to pay fucking. And
you're paying tax on that, like, don't forget. So at the end of you don't take it out of that money on the day, the cash you get. But once you get your fortnightly or bi-weekly paycheck, you look in the bottom of it, and they've taxed you on that as well. Uncle Sam's not missing out on anything. But let's finish up with story time. Story time. We're going to do planes, trains, and automobiles. We're going to do some airplane stories. So I've had 2 run-ins with a plane almost going down in my NBA career, and both of them were in my first 2 years. So we had a deal with Midwest Airlines, now defunct, shocker, with Milwaukee Bucks, and they were actually known for their cookies, but not so much for their flying, apparently. But I used to sit behind Tony Kukoc, veteran of mine, my rookie year. He was kind of my idol growing up, so it was kind of surreal. He used to sit. He had 2 seats to himself, and then I was behind him, had 2 seats to myself. He used to sit on the seat next to the window, and he would look out the window the whole fucking flight, right? Anything happens, any movement, a small turn by the plane, descending, he'd be looking out that window. And I was just like, man, like he was scared of flying essentially, right? So I asked him one day, and he said, look, with the Bulls one year, we almost basically crashed in downtown Chicago. So I was like, all right, fair enough. And I didn't give a shit about flying at that point, right? So then we're flying one night. We're flying from Detroit, I think it was from Detroit. We're flying over Lake Michigan, and just hear a massive bang. So we all have like Bose noise cancellation earphones. So we all heard it through that. Took our headphones off, like what's going on? So one of our motors engines just blew up in midair, freezing cold outside. So like we just drop a little bit, they descend, and they're like on the speaker, like buckle up, we're going to emergency land. Like holy shit. So it was kind of scary, but I was young and dumb at that time. I didn't really think too much of it. We landed in, I think, Grand Rapids, and I had to I can't even remember how we got home. And the second one was, get this one. This one's kind of scary. So we're in Brooklyn or New Jersey at the time, and we go to fly out, and our plane wasn't de-iced properly. So there was an issue with the plane. So we couldn't fly out. We come back the next day. They're like, look, we can't use this plane. We're going to bring another one in. Come back the next day. Well, they hadn't brought a new plane. They kept the same one, and they said it's all good now. So we go to take off. Apparently, they didn't de-ice the plane properly on takeoff. We take off, and as we're going up, ascending, apparently there's sparks and flames coming out of our motor, right? So this asshole in the tower in New Jersey doesn't radio us, doesn't tell us. So pilot doesn't know. So he gets like halfway up to altitude. And I guess he realized something was with the throttling or the power or whatever, something wasn't right. So he radios back in, and he's like, look, something's wrong. I'm getting some bad feedback from the controls. We're going to come back and land. I think something's wrong with the plane. He's like, oh yeah. We saw some sparks coming out of your motor, but just thought, whatever. Like, we're just like, what? Are you fucking kidding me? So anyway,
that's unbelievable.
We come back and we basically emergency land, and then we get stuck there another night. I think we had to miss a game because of it or something, but we got severely delayed. But just the perils of NBA travel, and now I'm a horrible flyer. Like when I was younger, like you could have done anything. I used to sleep on the floor of planes, on those chartered jets. Used to do all kinds of shit. Now it's like We hit like one little air pocket. I'm tightening that fucking belt. I've got my seat reclined forward. I'm holding on for dear life. And I'm now I am now Tony Kukoc. It's unbelievable. The older you get, those stupid little things stress you out a little bit more.
I totally agree. I was on a flight. It's funny, you say Michigan. I was in the D League. Dallas was fine. We never really had much of an issue, maybe some turbulence. But we were going to, we were out of Maine and Portland. I was coaching the Celtics D League team as an assistant. We were flying from like Maine to like New York to Detroit, and then Detroit to somewhere else. So it's D League travel, right? Not that you ever had to deal with that, but we were flying into Michigan, I think Grand Rapids actually, and they said like 30 minutes before we landed, it's like, our landing gear does not work right now, so we're gonna have to get into emergency crash positions. And this is like a puddle jumper. This plane was out of Gilligan's Island or something. I don't know how the fuck the thing was up in the first place. So I was next to Billy Thomas, who played in the NBA for a few years, and he was our veteran. And we were down in crash positions, hearing players praying and crying. I'm holding Billy's hand. I thought we were done. And thankfully, like 5 or 6 minutes before we descended, the fucking thing, the thing closed down. But that was some scary shit. I don't fuck with flights. I hate it. I don't mind flying. I've flown to China like 8 or 9 times. I don't care about it that much, but turbulence or anything like that, like you said, I'm at attention, like you said, buckling up, this and that. That shit scares the shit out of me. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, I had to stop wearing gray shirts on flights, gray t-shirts, because later on in my career, probably the last 4 or 5 years, because basically any turbulence or any bump, like my armpits would be soaking wet. I'm like, fuck, I got to start wearing just black t-shirts now, man. Because this is great. With Golden State, like that the first time I was there, we'd be playing poker, and we start hitting turbulence. I'd take my shirt off, and just be sitting there, no shirt on. Stewardesses would be laughing at me. I'd just be pouring sweat. It got to a point where stewardesses would come out to me. Sorry, you can't say that anymore. Flight attendants would come out before we're about to hit turbulence and be like, "Hey, boys, we're just giving you a warning. There's going to be some turbulence." I'm like, "That's fucking worse. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. I'd rather be surprised by it, because then once they tell you, then I'm sitting on that plane just bracing for impact." And sometimes
did they drug you or anything?
I wasn't that. I'm exaggerating a little bit. I wasn't that bad, but I definitely tightened the belt up. I wasn't sitting there like panicking where someone had to take me off the ledge. But yeah, I didn't enjoy it. I can tell you that much. But it wasn't. I don't think we had anyone that never been with anyone like that was that bad, that had to be sedated or anything. But man, it was, it definitely wasn't fun, but it was just a running joke that the stewardesses would come out. I'd be yelling at the pilot, because we used to sit at the front of the plane playing cards, and I'm like, "Look at your fucking radar, man. Go around that shit. What are you doing?" So they would always laugh at me because I knew the pilots, and it was just it ended up being a bit of banter, which would just be a fun part of the flight.
Yeah, that shit could get a little scary, especially those pockets of turbulence could get a little scary for anybody.
Especially when it's winter, like when it starts getting you going from...
the de-icing and stuff, yeah.
De-icing, and then you're going from a warm climate to a cold climate, and you just know eventually you're going to hit the border of one of those states or near the mountains somewhere in Utah, and you're just going to drop, or you're just going to do a left turn bank real quick, and you're like, oh God, so, but that's the fun of NBA travel, not like it was back in the day with trains and buses. But anyway, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks, Pro. We're going to take a week off from traveling next week. So for everyone out there, you're going to have 2 weeks of blue balls waiting for the next podcast. So hopefully we'll build up some momentum to that one. But thanks for tuning in. Rogue Bogues, all the social media platforms, podcast platforms, at Hoop Consultants on Instagram, and the Food Channel, Twitter. And by the way, the rich fuck is traveling. I'm still sitting in fucking Dallas changing dirty diapers for a fucking week. So don't get it twisted like I'm traveling. Yeah. The rich. Do you know how I'm traveling? I'm driving, baby. I'm driving 18 hours.
No, 18 the rich hours. Cheap fuck. The rich cheap fuck is traveling.
No, it's not a monetary decision. It's a governmental decision, because I don't trust these assholes here in Australia that if I come to a different state, that I'm not going to get locked in this shit for another 2-week lockdown. So the bonus of having a car on site is I can just jump in that shit and get the fuck out of here if I need to.
All right, so for the next 2 weeks, I'll practice Rogues Bogues instead of Rogues and Bogues. I appreciate that.
No, it's Rogue Bogues.
Rogue. Oh, all right, Rogue Bogues.
Less
I like
S's.
Rogues Bogues, actually.
No, but it's too much, so...
Too much S's for me.
Yeah,
I got
too
it.
much effort for you. So then that way, if we go rogue, it's one less for you, and then people can understand us better.
I appreciate it, brother. I hope you get turbulence in your car, by the way.
All right, everyone, take it easy. See you next time.
Take it easy.